3 words from my father's mouth, and 23 years of holding my family together just stopped mattering. "You're a burden, Claire." He said it so casually, like he was commenting on the weather. Like I hadn't spent the last decade making sure he had a family to toast at this goddamn dinner. I never thought I'd be the person posting here, but after what happened at my brother's engagement party, I need to get this out before I lose my mind. Or maybe I already did. I still don't know. The silence after those words was deafening. 30 people in my parents' dining room, cousins, aunts, uncles, family friends, and not one person said anything. Forks frozen halfway to mouths. Wine glasses suspended in midair. My mother examined her napkin like it held the secrets of the universe. That silence told me everything. They agreed with him. My father stood there at the head of the table, one hand on my brother Jason's shoulder, the other holding his champagne glass. He'd been going on for 5 minutes about Jason's accomplishments, Jason's new promotion, Jason's beautiful fiancée Meredith, the golden child, basking in the spotlight he was born into. Then he'd pivoted. And I'm grateful that finally, we have something to celebrate that isn't Claire's latest crisis or demand for attention. My grip tightened around my own glass until I felt it might shatter. My Aunt Linda, Dad's sister, wouldn't meet my eyes. My mother's hand trembled slightly as she reached for her water, but she didn't speak. Jason just smiled. That same indulgent smile he'd been giving me since we were kids. The poor Claire, always so dramatic smile. Something clicked at that moment. Not anger. I'd felt anger before. This was different. Clearer. Like a frequency I'd been trying to hear my whole life suddenly came through crystal clear. They actually believed this narrative. After everything. Maybe I should have just stayed quiet. Nodded. Let him finish his toast. But I couldn't. Not anymore. Not when I'd spent the last 2 years keeping secrets that would incinerate this picture-perfect family dinner in seconds. I set down my glass carefully, deliberately, and I smiled, because they were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. I just didn't know that CNN would do most of the heavy lifting for me. I stayed in my seat, watching them all pretend that moment hadn't just happened. My Aunt Linda laughed too loud at something Meredith said. Uncle Tom refilled wine glasses with aggressive hospitality. My mother began clearing appetizer plates even though people were still eating. The machine was recalibrating, smoothing over the crack my father had just created. From the outside, we looked like the American dream in a Brooks Brothers catalog. My father, Robert Chen, is a cardiovascular surgeon. My mother, Patricia, ran the junior league for 8 years and sits on 3 nonprofit boards. We had the house in the right neighborhood, the right schools, the right Christmas cards. People at the country club would tell my parents how lucky they were to have such accomplished children. But if you grew up inside those walls, you learned quickly that accomplishment was currency and the exchange rate was rigged. I'm Claire, 31. I'm a senior project manager at a tech company you've definitely heard of. I manage teams of 15, handle million-dollar budgets, and negotiate with C-suite executives who try to intimidate me daily. At work, people listen when I speak. At work, my competence is a given. At home, I'm still the girl who tries too hard and asks for too much. My mother has always been the emotional thermostat of our house. If she's warm, everyone relaxes, jokes around, acts human. If she's cold, and she's cold often, everyone tightens. Shoulders hunch, voices lower. You start mentally reviewing everything you've said or done in the past week, looking for the offense. She never yells. She doesn't have to. She just withdraws. Stops seeing you. And the rest of the family follows her lead like synchronized swimmers. My father enables it. Always has. Don't upset your mother was his mantra growing up. You know how she gets. As if her reactions were weather patterns we all just had to endure rather than choices she was making. He'd watch her ice me out for weeks over perceived slights and say nothing. Do nothing. Then wonder why I stopped coming to family dinners in my 20s. Jason is 34 and works in finance doing something he's never adequately explained to me. What I do know, he's borrowed money from our parents 4 times that I'm aware of. They paid for his MBA. They helped with his down payment. When his startup failed 3 years ago, Dad quietly absorbed the debt. Jason has received more help than I ever asked for, yet somehow I'm the burden. That's the golden child benefit package, I guess. If you grew up as the family scapegoat, you know exactly what I mean. My younger sister Emma, 28, was smirking into her wine glass throughout Dad's toast. Emma has always enjoyed my struggles. When I got laid off during the 2020 chaos, along with 30% of my company, she'd asked at family dinner, "So, when are you going to get a real job?" When I got my current position 6 months later with a significant raise, the subject was changed within 30 seconds. The lie I believed for years was what my mother told me when I was 16. Strong women carry the family, Claire. That's what we do. I didn't realize she meant only me. I didn't realize strong was code for convenient. I watched my father sit back down, satisfied with his toast. Jason was laughing about something with Meredith. My mother was smiling now. The warm thermostat setting was restored. They had no idea what I knew, what I'd been sitting on for 2 years. If I'd known what they were planning, the real reason for this dinner beyond Jason's engagement, I would have acted sooner. But I'd been on an information diet with them for months, and apparently, they'd learned to keep secrets too. My phone buzzed in my purse. I ignored it. That was a mistake. My mother always said, "Family takes care of family." That's what separates us from people who end up alone. I didn't realize until my late 20s that when she said family, she meant me. And when she said takes care of, she meant everyone else. The first time was when Jason was 26. He'd gotten into some trouble, the kind that requires a lawyer, who bills at $400 an hour. DUI, but with complications I still don't fully understand. Something about whose car it was, whose name was on the registration. Dad was furious but quiet about it. Mom was too stressed to handle this right now. So I handled it. $15,000. I'd just gotten a promotion, had savings for the first time in my life. I paid the lawyer, drove Jason to court dates, sat with him through community service orientations. When it was over, he'd said, "Thanks, sis. I owe you one." He never paid me back. When I brought it up 6 months later, my mother actually looked offended. "He's your brother, Claire. We don't keep score in this family." Apparently, we was doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence. The second time was bigger. 3 years ago, my parents were having cash flow issues. This is what happens when you maintain a lifestyle that requires 2 high incomes but one person has semi-retired and the other has expensive hobbies. The lake house they'd bought in 2019, their retirement dream property, had a mortgage they were struggling to cover along with their primary residence. Dad came to me, not Jason, who works in finance. Me. "Just until we sell the primary house and downsize," he'd said. 6 months, maybe a year. I took over the mortgage payments. $1,700 a month. For 2 years. That's over $40,000 if you're counting. They weren't. The quiet auto pays they pretended not to know about. I never got a thank you. I got, "Well, you make good money now and you don't have kids or a mortgage of your own." As if my financial stability existed specifically to subsidize theirs. Here's the thing though, my lawyer, Sarah, who I'd worked with on some contract reviews, insisted on something when I agreed to take over those payments. She had me document everything. Every transfer, every email, every conversation. And when my parents decided to transfer the lake house deed into a family trust last year, Sarah insisted on adding a reversion clause. "Just in case," she'd said. "If they sell it or transfer it again without repaying you, the property reverts to you automatically. It's protection." I thought she was being paranoid. Turns out she was being prophetic. I kept records. Not because I planned this. Just habit. Professional habit. At work, you document everything. Cover your ass, track your metrics, prove your value. I guess I brought that home without realizing it. The third pattern was more insidious, because it felt like love. My nephew, Jason's son from his first marriage, needed help with private school tuition 2 years ago. $8,000. Then Emma's startup costs for a business that folded in 4 months. $12,000. Then Mom's medical bills when her insurance didn't cover some elective procedure. $6,000. Always the first call. Never the first invite. If you've ever had a family bank account, you understand. You become infrastructure. Essential but invisible. Like plumbing. Nobody thanks their pipes for working. I did it to prove I belonged. To prove I was valuable. To earn the warmth I watched them give Jason so freely. The evidence always pointed the other way, but I'm a stubborn person. An optimistic person. Despite everything. Or I was. Sitting at that engagement dinner, listening to my father call me a burden, I did the math. Rough math, but close enough. Over the past decade, I'd given or loaned my family somewhere north of $90,000. I'd taken over responsibilities, covered emergencies, and showed up for every crisis. I'd postponed buying my own place because family comes first. I'd skipped vacations because someone always needed something. And the truth that was crystallizing in my chest like ice forming on a windshield, was that they resented me for it. Not because I'd done it badly, but because I'd done it at all. Because my competence was a mirror that showed their dependence, and people hate mirrors that show them things they don't want to see. My mother had trained me well. Be strong. Be capable. Be the one who handles things. But she never mentioned that being strong in this family meant being resented. That being capable meant being expected to be more capable next time. That handling things meant you'd always be the one holding the bag. Jason caught my eye across the table and raised his glass slightly, grinning. A victor's grin. Like he'd won something. He had no idea that the paperwork sitting in my fire safe, the trust documents, the reversion clause, the email trails, would become the most important things I owned. My phone buzzed again. Then again. I pulled it out, annoyed. 14 missed calls. 6 voicemails. 23 texts. All from the same person, my colleague Marcus, who worked in our communications department. The preview of his last text made my blood run cold. Claire, turn on the news right now. It's about your family. CNN is running it. I stared at my phone screen, Marcus's texts blurring together. My hands had gone numb. Around me, dinner continued like a play where everyone knew their lines except me. My father had returned to his meal, cutting his steak with surgical precision. The subject had moved on. Someone was talking about summer vacation plans. The lake house, ironically. How nice it would be this year. Emma leaned forward, her voice honey-sweet with poison. You know, Claire, Mom's kind of right. You've been really distant lately. We barely see you anymore. I looked up slowly. Emma's expression was perfectly calibrated, concerned with just enough smugness underneath. She was enjoying this. It's like you only show up when you need something, she continued. Or when you want to make everything about you. My Aunt Linda made a small noise. Not quite agreement. Not quite protest. Just acknowledgement that words had been spoken. Jason set down his fork. Look, if you're struggling financially or emotionally or whatever, just say so. We're family. We can help. The way he said it, like he was being magnanimous. Like he was offering me something instead of gaslighting me about the opposite of reality. I felt something crack in my chest. Not break, crack. Like ice under pressure, the fracture lines spread fast. My mother hadn't spoken since my father's toast. She'd been watching me with that expression I knew so well. Disappointment that I existed. Irritation that I was ruining the evening by having the audacity to react to being called a burden in front of 30 people. She set down her wine glass, dabbed her mouth with her napkin. And then she said it, slowly, like she wanted each word to carve into me. Claire, it's time you stopped relying on this family and grew up. The temperature in the room dropped. Or maybe it was just me, going cold from the inside out. I waited. Surely someone would say something. Surely someone would point out the absolute insanity of that statement. My aunt, my uncle, even Jason, someone who knew, who'd been there for at least some of it. The silence stretched. Forks resumed their quiet scraping. Someone coughed. Meredith asked if anyone wanted more wine. Agreement. From everyone. I didn't snap. Snap implies chaos, loss of control, emotional overflow. This was the opposite. This was clarity settling like a key into a lock, turning, clicking into place. Excuse me, I said quietly. I stood, my legs steady beneath me. I walked to the bathroom down the hall. The same bathroom where I'd hidden during fights as a kid. The same mirror where I'd practiced looking normal before going back out to family dinners. The same tile that I'd stared at while crying silently, so no one would hear. I looked at myself now. Really looked. I am 31 years old. Successful. Capable. Alone in a bathroom at her parents' house, still trying to earn love from people who'd decided long ago she wasn't worth it. I wasn't being pushed out. The truth was worse and simpler. I'd never truly been let in. I'd been useful. And now, apparently, I wasn't even that. My phone buzzed again. Marcus. Claire. Please. You need to see this before someone tells them. I splashed water on my face, reapplied my lipstick, fixed my hair. When I walked back out, I looked exactly as composed as I felt. No one had noticed I'd left. I picked up my coat from the hall closet. Calm. Methodical. My purse. My keys. My mother glanced up. Where are you going? Home. We're in the middle of dinner, Claire. Don't be dramatic. I looked at her. Really looked at her. I saw her clearly for the first time, maybe. I'm not being dramatic. I'm leaving. You always do this, Emma muttered. I didn't respond. Didn't defend. Didn't justify, argue, defend, or explain. Jade. I'd read about it on Reddit months ago. How you shouldn't jade with toxic people because they're not looking for understanding. They're looking for ammunition. I walked to the door. Put my hand on the handle. Claire. My father's voice. I didn't turn around. We'll talk when you're ready to apologize, my mother said. I didn't look back. They hadn't earned even a final glance. The cold air outside hit my face like a blessing. My hands were steady as I unlocked my car. Steady as I started the engine. Steady as I pulled out of their circular driveway for what I suspected might be the last time. I drove home in complete silence. No music. No tears. Just the sound of my breathing and the hum of the road beneath me. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd finally put me in my place, made me understand my role, and drove home the message that I was tolerated, not treasured. They didn't understand yet. But they would. What I did next, I did with complete calm. My apartment felt different when I walked in, like it had been waiting for me to finally decide something, to finally stop pretending. I set my keys in the bowl by the door, hung up my coat, poured a glass of water, and stood in my kitchen, drinking it slowly in the dark. No tears. No screaming into pillows. No calling my friends to vent. Just a strange, settled feeling in my chest, like a bone that had been out of place for years had finally clicked back where it belonged. I know some people will say I should have talked to them first, had a calm conversation, explained how I felt, set boundaries like a mature adult. But I was done talking. I'd been talking for a decade. They just hadn't been listening. I walked to my bedroom and started going through my closet. Not packing exactly. Just organizing. Deciding what stayed and what went. Every shirt I pulled out felt like a line being drawn. This version of Claire or that one. The one who showed up and got insulted. Or the one who knew her worth. The choices felt obvious suddenly. At 11 p.m., I opened my laptop. The blue glow lit up my living room as I sat cross-legged on my couch. I pulled up my financial tracking spreadsheet, the one I'd been maintaining for years. The one Sarah had insisted I keep detailed. I'd never actually totaled it before. Never sat down and added up every single payment, every loan, every temporary arrangement that became permanent. Mortgage payments for the lake house, $40,800 over 24 months. Jason's legal fees, $15,000. Various emergencies, $34,200. Nephew's tuition, $8,000. Emma's failed business, $12,000. Mom's medical bills, $6,000. Miscellaneous, can you just cover this requests, $8,500. Total, $124,500. $124,500. Seeing it all in one place was like watching a lifetime spool out into numbers. I'd given them the down payment for a house, a nice car, a wedding, a year of living. I'd given them my 20s, financially speaking, and they'd called me a burden. I opened my banking app. Found the automatic payment I'd set up for the lake house mortgage. Hovered my finger over the cancel button. My mother's voice in my head. It's time you stop relying on this family. I pressed cancel. The confirmation email arrived 30 seconds later. Next, the family cell phone plan. I'd added my parents to my corporate plan 3 years ago because it was cheaper for everyone. I'd been paying for their phones. For Jason's phone. For Emma's phone. Cancel. 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 Each confirmation email felt like an exhale I'd been holding for decades. The streaming services I shared. The insurance policy I'd added my mother to as a beneficiary, which had somehow resulted in me covering her supplemental payments. The cloud storage for family photos that I paid for monthly. The magazine subscriptions I'd gifted and somehow kept paying for. Cancel. 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 They told me to stop relying on them. So I was. Completely. The irony was so sharp it almost made me laugh. Then I opened the folder I'd labeled Lake House Docs. The trust documents. The transfer agreements. And there, on page 7 of the addendum Sarah had insisted on, the clause written in neat legalese. In the event that benefactor, Claire M. Chin, discontinues financial support for the property, or in the event of material breach of good faith by trustees, ownership of said property shall revert in full to benefactor within 60 days of discontinuation or breach. Sarah had explained it to me at the time. If they screw you over, the house becomes yours. If they try to sell it without paying you back, it becomes yours. If they cut you out of the trust, it becomes yours. It's insurance. I'd signed it thinking it was paranoid. My family wouldn't do that. We were family. Sitting in my dark living room, looking at that clause, I understood what Sarah had seen that I couldn't. She'd known. She'd watched me describe my family and seen exactly what they were. The lake house was worth approximately $890,000 now. I'd looked it up 6 months ago when Dad had casually mentioned they might sell in a few years. I sat back against my couch. They thought they'd put me in my place tonight. They thought they'd held all the power, all the leverage, all the control. They had no idea. This wasn't revenge. Not yet. This was preparation. This was me finally, stopping the bleed. Stopping the endless giving to people who saw it as their due. I closed my laptop. Sat in the darkness. I felt calm for the first time in years. 3 days passed before my phone rang. I'd been waiting for it. Preparing for it. I'd even rehearsed what I'd say, though in the end, I wouldn't need much. My mother's name lit up my screen. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Claire. Her voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk about the mortgage payment. There seems to be an issue. There's no issue, I said calmly. I canceled it. Silence. Then, you what? I stopped relying on you. Like you told me to. Claire, this isn't funny. The payment is due in 3 days. You can't just. I can. I did. I could hear her breathing. Could picture her face, that expression when things didn't go according to her script. We need to discuss this in person. As a family. No. Excuse me? No. We're not discussing anything. I'm done. That's when I heard it. My father's voice in the background, asking what was happening. My mother's sharp whisper. Then my father was on the line. Claire, let's not be hasty. We can work this out. And that's when I heard it in the background. The television. A voice I recognized. A news anchor. Breaking story about prominent surgeon Robert Chen and allegations of. My father's voice cut off abruptly. I heard fumbling. A door closing. My phone buzzed. Marcus texting again. They know. It's everywhere. I smiled in my dark apartment. They had no idea what was coming. But they were about to find out. Jason called first. Not 10 minutes after I hung up on my mother. What the fuck did you do? Not, are you okay? Not, we need to talk about what happened at dinner. Just immediate accusation. I stopped paying for things that aren't mine. I said calmly. The mortgage, Claire? Are you insane? They're going to lose the house. Then they should pay their own mortgage. You can't just, we had an arrangement. We had an arrangement where I paid, and you all benefited. That arrangement is over. Is this because of what Dad said? Jesus, Claire, grow up. He was drunk. He didn't mean it. There it was. The minimization. The expectation that I'd fold, apologize, fix it like I always did. You told me at dinner that if I needed help, I should just ask. I'm asking you to leave me alone. I hung up. Emma called next. Then my Aunt Linda, which surprised me, since she'd barely spoken to me in years except to ask for donations to her charity galas. Then Jason again. Then my mother, 3 times in a row. I didn't answer. My father left a voicemail at 2 a.m. His reasonable voice, the one he used with difficult patience. Claire, I understand you're upset. What I said was inappropriate, and I apologize. But we need to discuss this mortgage situation like adults. This affects the whole family. Call me back, so we can find a solution. Solution. No apology. Not acknowledgement. Solution to the problem I'd created by having boundaries. The next morning, I got an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. A formal letter demanding I reinstate the mortgage payments per the verbal agreement established in 2022 and warning of legal action if I refused. I read it twice. Then I called Sarah. They did what? She actually laughed. Claire, do you understand what they just did? Threatened to sue me for stopping payments on their mortgage that I was never legally obligated to pay in the first place? They triggered the reversion clause. By contesting the arrangement and threatening legal action, they've constituted a material breach of good faith. The property reverts to you. Automatically. No dispute. I sat down. Are you sure? I'm looking at the document right now. It's airtight. They triggered it themselves. She paused. Do you want me to send the formal notification, or do you want to tell them yourself? I thought about it. I thought about my mother's face at that dinner. My father's casual cruelty. Jason's smirk. Emma's pleasure at my pain. I'll tell them, I said. In person. Claire, I need to see their faces. I chose the location carefully. Not their house. Not mine. The diner 3 blocks from my parents' place. The one where we used to have breakfast after church when I was a kid. Familiar enough to keep me grounded. Public enough to prevent the kind of scene my mother excelled at. I got there early. Ordered coffee. I placed a manila folder on the table in front of me. They arrived together. A united front. My mother, my father, Jason, Emma. They sat across from me in the booth, like defendants entering a courtroom. My mother's face was carefully neutral. My father looked tired. Jason looked angry. Emma looked smug, like she expected me to fold any second. Thank you for meeting me, I said. Let's skip the pleasantries, my father said. What's this about, Claire? Why did you cancel everything? Why are you doing this? I opened the folder. Inside were printed spreadsheets, bank statements, email chains. Years of documentation. These aren't legal documents, I said calmly. These are mine. My records. I slid the first page across. A summary sheet. Every payment, every loan, every temporary arrangement, categorized and totaled. My mother glanced at it. Her expression didn't change, but her hand tightened on her coffee cup. Jason picked it up. His eyes scanned the numbers. His face went pale. You paid this much? Emma's voice was quiet, almost shocked. For all of us, I confirmed. This is. My father trailed off, reading over Jason's shoulder. $124,500 over 10 years, I said. Not counting the things I can't quantify. Time, crisis management, and emotional labor. We never asked you to keep track like this, my mother said coldly. This is manipulative, Claire. You're right. You never asked me to keep track. You just kept asking for more. I pulled out another document. The trust paperwork. The addendum with the reversion clause highlighted in yellow. When I took over your mortgage payments, my lawyer insisted on protection. This clause states that if you stop acting in good faith, or if you contest the arrangement, the property reverts to me automatically. I slid it across the table. Yesterday, you sent me a legal threat. You contested the arrangement. You triggered the clause yourselves. The silence was absolute. A waitress walked past with plates, and they all stared at the paper like it might bite them. That's not. Jason started. You can't. I already did. The property reverted to me the moment your lawyer sent that email. It's done. My father's face had gone gray. Claire, you don't want to do this. That house that I paid for 2 years, while you lived in it for free, we were going to pay you back, my mother said, but her voice wavered.
When?
After you called me a burden in front of 30 people? After you told me to grow up and stop relying on you? I leaned forward. You didn't lose the house because of me. You lost it because you tried to intimidate me into giving more, and you finally pushed too far. Emma's eyes were wide. It's actually wide. You're really doing this. You're taking their house. I'm taking the house I paid for, that they put my name on because they needed me to, that they forgot was actually mine the moment they didn't need me anymore. My mother's mask finally cracked. Her face twisted. Anger, panic, something close to fear. You ungrateful. Careful, I said quietly. We're in public. She stopped. Her hand was shaking. They weren't just shocked. They were unmasked, exposed. The narrative they'd built, the burdened daughter, the generous parents, the successful golden child, was disintegrating in real time. Jason put his head in his hands. This is insane. You're destroying the family over money? You destroyed it the moment you decided my worth was transactional. I stood, smoothed my coat, pulled a $1 bill from my wallet, and placed it on the table next to the documents. That's all that remains, I said. Everything else I already gave. And you didn't even see it. I picked up my purse. I started walking toward the door. Claire. My mother's voice cracked. Actual emotion bleeding through. Claire, wait. I stopped. Didn't turn around. Gave her one last chance to say something real. We can fix this. As a family. Please. Still about fixing. Still about maintaining the facade.
Still not about me.
I walked out. The door closed behind me with a soft chime. The cold air hit my face. The parking lot stretched out in front of me. My car waited where I'd left it. And for the first time in 23 years, I felt free. The silence in the days after was different. Not the cold silence of being shut out. Not the anxious silence of waiting for the next crisis. This was the silence you earn after telling the truth. The kind that settles into your bones and feels like relief. My apartment felt lighter. Brighter, somehow, even though nothing had changed physically. Morning light came through my windows the way it always had, but now I actually noticed it. Sat with my coffee and watched it move across the floor. Small things. Present things. Sarah called 3 days later. It's official, she said. The property is yours. No contestation period, no loopholes. They can't touch it. And the money I paid? You could pursue it. We have documentation. But it would be messy, expensive, and take years. I thought about it, sitting in my bright living room, holding my coffee, feeling the weight of nothing pressing down on me. No, I said. I don't need it back. Justice doesn't need to be loud to be real. She was quiet for a moment. You're a better person than I'd be. I'm just tired of carrying their weight. My father sent an email a week later.
Short.
No admission of guilt. No real apology. Just, we're figuring things out. The lawyers say the house is yours. We'll be moving in the spring. That was it. Part of me had hoped for more. An acknowledgement. A real apology. Some sign that they understood what they'd done, what they'd taken from me over the years. But people can only meet you as deeply as they've met themselves. And my family had never been good at looking inward. Maybe they'll grow. Maybe they'll look back in 5 years and understand. Maybe they won't. Either way, I'm walking forward. Some doors close so you can finally walk through others. Last Saturday, I drove out to the lake house. My lake house now, legally speaking, though it still felt strange to think of it that way. I walked down to the water, sat on the dock my money had helped maintain, and watched the sun set over water that had never really been theirs to begin with. I felt lighter. Not because I'd won some grand victory. Not because I'd gotten revenge or proven a point. but because I'd finally put down a weight I was never meant to carry. For 23 years, I'd believed that love was earned through sacrifice. That if I just gave enough, did enough, proved enough, they'd finally see me, finally value me, finally love me the way they loved Jason, so effortlessly. But I hadn't abandoned my family in that diner. I'd stopped abandoning myself. Boundaries aren't punishments. They're invitations for people to meet you with respect. And when people refuse that invitation, when they rage against the boundary and call it cruelty, they're showing you exactly who they are. My mother always said family takes care of family. She was right. She just never understood that I was family too. I still think about that dinner sometimes. My father's toast. The silence that followed. The moment something in me finally, irrevocably shifted. The heaviest chains are the ones we put on ourselves. The ones we wear because someone we love told us they were jewelry. My life is quieter now. Steadier. I have dinner with friends who actually ask how I'm doing and wait for the real answer. I'm saving for things I want, not things other people need. I sleep through the night without my phone on the nightstand, waiting for the next emergency I'll be expected to solve. Finally, my own. Some people will only see your worth when you're no longer there to provide it. And by then, it's too late. Not because you're cruel or unforgiving, but because you've finally learned the difference between being needed and being valued. If this story echoes something in your life, I'd love to hear your thoughts below. And if you've been through something similar, if you've been the family bank account, the emotional support, the one who shows up while others show out, know this. Choosing yourself isn't selfish. It's survival. It's the moment you realize that doors that close aren't always losses. Sometimes they're liberations. Sometimes the breaking point isn't where you shatter. It's where you finally become whole. Subscribe if you want more stories of people who finally said enough. Who drew the line. Who walked away from tables where they were discussed but never honored. Because boundaries aren't walls. They're doors with locks you control. And the right people will always knock. The wrong ones will rage at the door and call you a burden for installing it in the first place. I know which ones my family are now. And I know, finally, that I deserved better all along.